Hi, my name is Sharice Raven. I go online by the name of Denkai. And this video is a bit of a spin-off from the husband tag video that's going around. I originally questioned my husband with lots of cross-stitch related acronyms, terminology, that kind of thing. And to see his funny responses and to basically see exactly how much he knew about cross stitch, which was, so-so, but it was quite funny. I'll put a link into that video here. I know a lot of other people have been quizzing the husbands, which is lovely, and it's so funny to watch. If you yourself have been quizzing your husband, by all means, put a link down below and then I'll add it if people want to watch. That'd be quite fun. But basically this is an adaptation from that I'll be going through the terminology used for cross stitches, and there's quite a lot more that I've kind of thought of that I thought that people would like, or at least need to know about if you're starting stitching to begin with. So the video is mainly for beginners, kind of like a basic guide really, without Mike. But no, hopefully a bit more factual. There's quite a few more pieces of terminology that I've kind of thought of that the beginner would find useful and helpful. So yeah, obviously if you're a seasoned stitcher, probably not the video for you, although if you want to listen to my beautiful voice, you're welcome to. But yeah, I'll start off. Right, if you're a cross stitcher, first word is floss, and this is floss. This is it comes on a skein, so obviously this is the thread that you use to make your cross stitch, and when it comes like this is how you buy it. It's called a skein. I'll get Mike to pop the little words up at the bottom to kind of help with how you spell them and things. Right, and this is like a plain colour. And you can also get variegated, and variegated, that's an example of variegated. Get that light off there. And obviously you can see there's lots of different colours. At one end it goes from light blue. This is light blue from LJ Fabrics. So yeah, light blue at one end to a darker blue at the other, variegated. So when you stitch, depending on how you stitch, it alters how your stitches come out, the colour of your stitches. If you do kind of like the whole stitch complete, so up and then down and then up and then cross it, obviously, to make one cross, that cross will be the colour that was that particular cross. If you decide to do it in a different method, so like sew all the bottoms and then sew all the tops, obviously maybe all the bottoms will be light blue, all the tops will be kind of light blue going into darker blue. That'll have a different effect. So that's a bit about variegated flosses there. Krennic. Krennic is a type of floss. This sparkly stuff. There we go. I have mine on a bobbin. This is a bobbin. I prefer the plastic ones to the paper ones. I find paper ones, because I'm terrible, I just like throw my bobbins around everywhere. Plastic ones are a bit more durable, which is good for me. So yeah, this is, let me wind this up. Yeah, Krennic is basically sparkly thread like this. They're unraveling. Never mind. You see that? Shimmer! Yeah, and that will add a bit of glam, a bit of bling, pizzazz to your cross stitch. If you want, they're quite nice to highlight things as well, so if you've got a couple of stars, maybe add a little bit twinkle, that kind of thing. So that is Krennic. That is one kind of make of them, the sparkly threads. There's lots of them. There's Petite Treasure Braid, which I have somewhere, I don't know where, which I find quite nice as well. Orts. My little Orts ball. Orts, I can open it, are the little offcuts. Orts, O-R-T, can refer to old ratty thread, or some people have also said that it comes from the language, no idea which language, I think it was English language. It basically refers to the remainder of something. So there you go. That's another one that goes up there. So that's orts. People normally have an orts jar. I myself have this little mason jar, little starting off there. And what people do is they normally collect them up, and then you put them somewhere. So you can, or you can throw them, you know, if you don't want them, throw them. But yeah, little bauble there. I just put the year on. I got this idea from Katie Stitch Mania. So now a few people have done that. Some other people will use them, make like an ornament for a Christmas tree, and then use them as filler, which is quite a nice idea as well. So that's orts. We've done bobbin, floss toss. Now this sounds quite rude, a little bit kinky, floss toss. It's not what you think. Nothing to do with cross stitch or threads or a tub of Nutella on a Friday night. No, it is a way of looking and seeing if the material and the flosses and all the different colours and things that you want to use for a pattern go well together. What people will do is they'll get, so say for example you have a fabric like this. This is a hand-dyed fabric, which is why there's like lots of mottling and different colours and things like this. This is Aether 32 count Belfast from Chromatic Alchemy. You can see lots of mottling, and what people will do is they'll get the floss like this, they'll get the variegated ones, and they'll kind of match them out. So you lay your fabric out, you lay your floss out, you have your pattern out, and you see, is that going to go? Presuming, obviously, it's you basically do it to check that the fabric that you've chosen, if you choose a hand-dyed fabric, is going to go well with the pattern. Or if you're substituting some of the floss, if your substitutions will go well. So that is a floss toss. And it's quite nice. If you're in the stitching community, if you're on Facebook, people will sometimes say, what do you think of this, my floss toss? I can't say no without thinking of rude things. Don't mind. Yeah, so that is floss toss. Needle minder. Needle minders, see if I can move you there. There's some of the needle minders that I make. They are basically ways, there's an example there, just one, of bing, you put your needle on it. And if I can show you, let me get the fabric, we'll get this fabric out again, which is quite nice. Let me get a hoop on it so I can show you a bit better. Hoop at the bottom. Fabric. This is a new hoop. I'm not quite used to using it yet. This one is a spring-loaded one rather than a wood one. So, yeah, the tension on that is rubbish, so obviously I can't use it very well. Right, just for an example, we've got a fabric in a hoop, a needle minder. Well, you'll have your lovely little pattern. If you want to know more about needle minders, I'll put a link to my video up now, or in the thing below. So your little glam bit, your little picture, or your little item will go at the front where you're stitching. So this is the front, and then you'll have a needle. Another needle will go at the back. So that will stay there by the power of magnetism. That'll stay, so you're stitching, and if I can just get thread here, there we go. So you're threading, you're sewing along, and you decide, oh, need the toilet, or need whatever, packing down for the night. Your needle will go on the magnet, on the needle minder, like that, and it will mind your needle, hence needle minder. That is that. Right, what else have we got? A UFO. A UFO stands for unfinished object. Basically something that you started and you liked at the time, you don't really now, and it's in well, not in the bin, but it's at the bottom of a drawer somewhere hiding and you're forgetting about it. That's UFO, unfinished object. FFO is a fully finished object. So this is one that I stitched up last year. Yeah, that is a finished object. If I wanted it to be an FFO, a fully finished object, I would have done something with it rather than shove it in the drawer, which is what I did. So I would have put it in a nice frame, or turned it into a wall hanging or a cushion or something equally as snazzy. But I'm not very good at stuff like that. So yeah, it went in the drawer. That's FFO. A BAP or a HAP. A BAP, if you're Britain, if you're English, a BAP can mean two things. It can mean boobies, BAPs, or it can mean a bread cake. Or if you're a stitcher, it means a big ass project, and I'm talking big. I don't just mean like a little, I'm talking like massive, like massive, like all of that, the whole complete of that fabric done and the rest, massive, all stitched up. Or sometimes people call it a HAP, which is a huge ass project. Either way, that thing's going to take years, and I mean years, to stitch up. But when you get them done, absolutely beautiful, absolutely. And I've seen some pictures. I haven't completed one myself. Yeah, I don't have patience for that. I'm trying. But they just look beautiful. They're like full, well, they're proper works of art really, because you know the time and energy and effort gone into them, and yeah, that's that. Excuse me. A whip. A whip is a work in progress. This here, but yeah, we'll do this one. A work in progress. So this is a piece that I'm stitching. It's by Gecko Rouge, and it's the eye, or eye candy. So it's just like a little picture of like an eye with loads of colours on and stuff. WIP stands for work in progress. This is a work in progress. Although I've got plans for next year and it's not in them, so it might become maybe a UFO. Maybe, I don't know. I really like it. But there's so much to stitch. So much to stitch. Right, conversion. This is where you take a pattern and you take colours, and you think, right, if something's coming up as, I don't know, lots of greens and things, and you think, I don't mind the greens, but I'd quite like to change it and put some blues in there. You would look at the greens that are there, the different shades of greens, and maybe try and match them to the blues that are there. So for example, there's like a really dark green, sea green, then like a medium green, a pale green, and then a really light green. You get the same kind of corresponding range of colours, but do them as blue. So a really pale blue to a medium blue to a really dark blue. Yeah, so you're just kind of converting from the green to the blue. If you've got an example of this, Kay has a floss, well, she's on Flosstube, so she has Flosstube video, and she's doing a really lovely conversion of a mermaid tail and fin and hair and everything. It's beautiful, really beautiful. So I'll link to her channel, so you can, if you're interested in conversions, you can kind of see the changes that she's done. A sal is a stitch along. That's what it means, SAL, stitch along. This is where you get different parts of a completed project broken down, and you do one part and then another part and then another part, kind of gradually along a period of time with other people as well. There's one for Lakeside, I know Clowns Factory do one. I'm trying to think of all the other ones. There's so many of them. If that's something that interests you, then I know that Stitch Mania on Facebook have a list of kind of all the different events and things that they do, and lots of different sales and things. Yeah, so you can sign up for them, but it is essentially you stitch in to a certain piece or a section of a certain piece that is released over a period of time. Yeah, along with lots of other people, and people like to kind of share the progress and pictures and things like that. Stitchy spot. A stitchy spot is a place that someone likes to go to do their stitching. It's usually quite comfy, quite cozy, nice chair. They've got the light set up, they've got the lamp set up, they've got the frame if you want to buy a nice frame. Basically everything around you to make it the perfect relaxing stitchy experience. Maybe with a laptop or telly on, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's a stitchy spot. Next, frogging. This is where a frog comes to visit you. No, I'm joking. It's where you're doing your stitching and you made a mistake, a ball's up, you haven't counted right, and you have to take it out. So you get your, I don't know, people do, I've got these little scissors that do it, or you can have like a thread picker, or some people like to try and go over it with the needle and redo it. That is frogging. Right, thread heaven. This is thread heaven. You might see it. You open the little top, and in it, let me get the top layer off because it's a bit dirty. Though it doesn't really matter. There we go. It's like a waxy kind of chemical substance, and you will run your floss through it. And then you just kind of wipe off the excess, and it kind of smooths out your floss. Some people like to use it, some people don't. Personally, I am a thread heavener, or a thread heavener. What I have done actually is shove a magnet on the back so that I can stick it to lamps. Or which this is where it goes. Yeah, stick it to lamps or on the side of a frame if you decide to use thread heaven. It basically coats it and prevents, let me read it, prevents fraying and tangling, and I find that I railroad, I'll go into that later, and I found that helps, and that's a bit easier. It's personal preference if you want to use it or you don't. I find it doesn't leave any kind of residue on the thread, and it just helps me make them lie a little bit neater. Right, that's thread heaven. Oh, railroading from that is a way of stitching so that you force your threads or your stitches to lie a little bit neater. Well, I think they make them lie a bit neater. Some people don't. Some people like it, some people don't. It's all about personal preference. I'll include a link to a video instantly I have just made about railroading to help. So hopefully check that out, see if you like it. Right, fabrics. We're going to go over fabrics, so I need some space. Right, we'll start off with Aida. This is Aida. If you can see the holes quite clearly. There's quite like little box shapes to it, and there's like lots of threads together and a little space for a hole. Lots of threads together, little space for a hole. So they just kind of look like little squares. So that one, that's nice and soft, squidgy. And then there's this one that I've just bought, which is like, well, I didn't just buy it, I bought it over summer, but it is literally like card, like this thing will cut you. So I might have to soak this to make it all nice and floppy. But that is a 14 count. If you look at this one, if you can see with the light, that the little squares are smaller, and that's because it's higher count. And I'll go over counts in a little bit. So that is Aida, quite boxy, quite square. Usually beginners find that quite easy or easier to use than even weave and linen. This is an example of even weave. Let me get this over there. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. Basically it is the threads are more woven, so instead of just being quite boxy, it's like one like that, and then the other one kind of woven like that. So big fish, little fish. So yeah, it's really hard to explain how they're kind of woven together, but the squares are a lot more delicate. Usually the even weave you would stitch over two over two. I'll go into that later. So that is even weave. Yeah, the threads are more evenly distributed and less boxy. So you would normally stitch over a few more of them to create the same shape of the stitch, the same length of the stitch. So that is even weave. Aida comes in different sizes, so that'll come, people usually stitch from like 14 to 18 or 20 count Aida. Even weave, people normally stitch 25 counts, all the way up, 25, 28. That's that. Linen, it's the same as even weave in the sense that the threads are one like that, and then kind of woven, so you kind of jump from one hole to another. But linen is the same as that, except it's less uniform. So if you look at it here, it's all very uniform, everything's very much the same. There's no kind of bumps. It's just all kind of smooth. Smooth, sorry. If you look at linen, if I can get this, and you can see, maybe see if you can see the surface slightly. No, that's not going to work. Let's put it up and see if you can see. Hopefully you can see that although it still has the kind of uniformity, the threads themselves can be a little bumpy. So the stitches aren't perfect. And it's, I don't know, it's more kind of traditional, I think, to use the linen than it is to use the Aida. Like, traditional in the sense of, you know, years begone by and everything else. That's that. Hardanger is another type of material that people use. I'll show you that. I think personally it's a bit like Aida, but this comes in 22 count. It only comes in 22 count. That is Hardanger, if you can see. Let me try and hold it up so you can see the light through it, maybe. Yeah, so it's quite a fine count. I personally think that it has like kind of like a bit of a plasticky feel. And what people will do with Hardanger is there are some specific charts for Hardanger, and they call lots of kind of speciality stitches and things like that. And then once it's complete, you'll go and you'll cut out little sections of the Hardanger and create beautiful patterns. I'll ask my not so glamorous assistant Mike, my husband, to put up an example now of Hardanger cross stitch. There we go. All right. Magic Guide. This is an example of Magic Guide. It's basically coloured stripes that are already in the fabric. So there's nothing on, no one's penned it or anything else, just the colour is already put on there. This is Magic Guide on even weave that I have. But you can get it on Aida as well. Generally you don't find it on linens. Linens are more for the hand dyed. Yeah, hand dyed in different colours. As I said, this is a piece of hand dyed even weave. Hand dyed even weave. There we go. And this is a piece of hand dyed even weave. They come in lots of different colours. There's so many different colours, and I think they're nice with all the mottling, different colour variation and things. So you'd probably use hand dyed if you weren't doing a full coverage. Full coverage is where you cover the entirety of the section of the fabric. So for example, here we have the whole fabric, and if I was doing this as a chart or as a pattern,
I would basically, obviously you need a border, usually 3 inches on every side. So I would usually have like, so like a square. Imagine there's like a square covering the centre, and all of it, every single stitch was stitched. There was no breaks, no gaps, no nothing. That is full coverage. The opposite of full coverage would be if there was just, if you're doing, for example, a scene. So there's someone sat at a table. You would just stitch the someone sat at the table. So there'd be gaps between the table legs, above the table, where it would just be the plain fabric, and obviously you would stitch the person at the table. I'm sure you know what I mean. Hopefully you know what I mean with that. Right, where were we? I've done Magic Guide. Oh, the Magic Guide that you do have, sorry, incidentally, it washes out. So once you've stitched it, you'll wash it in warm water or leave it to soak, and it comes out. And it does, because I did it and it did. Just to appease your sense of anxiety, because I was very anxious about it. I had to stitch all that and then find it doesn't come out or ruin it. But no, it comes out. I would advise, though, if you are using Magic Guide or something similar, where you have to wash it or soak it, that you use threads or floss, that is colour guarded, and that basically means that you can wash it or get it wet and the colour won't leak everywhere. I know DMC are definitely colour guarded. It happens when you get, usually when you buy like a lot of cheaper threads, because I know if you go abroad, China, that kind of thing, they sell floss threads at quite a cheaper discounted price, but they're not colour guarded. So you need to be very careful if you buy something with like Magic Guide on and you use non-colour guarded threads. If you wash them, then you know all of that's going to be wasted, because all of your threads and your colours may kind of run everywhere and ruin your design. I'd also be careful with your variegated threads, because generally they are not colour guarded and the colour will leak everywhere. So that's probably not the best. In that kind of situation, if you did want to have some kind of gridding where you can see the different squares as you do on the pattern, if you want them there on the fabric, and you are using non-colour guarded floss, not DMC or Anchor, and you want to use the variegated threads, you'd be better off gridding. This is gridding. Let me just show that. As you can see at the bottom, that red that runs through is a little spool of wire that I have, and I've just made marked out 9 spaces and then gone under 2, marked out 9, gone under 2, and done the same across. So I have the appearance of a grid there, which would reflect what I'm charting, what I'm stitching. Here we go. So you kind of use that as a guide to kind of help you line up your stitches. But at the end, when the pattern's fully complete, you don't need the grids in there anymore, the lines in there. And so what you would do is just pull it, and all the wire would just pull all the way through. It's a special type of thread. It's not your floss. Don't use floss to grid. Floss is, if you puncture it, you can't pull through it. It's very difficult to kind of pull through it, and it will just be set and in there in the pattern, and that would be no good. This is special thread. It has the feeling of like fishing wire, but it's not fishing wire. It's Easy Count. That's it, Easy Count. So just look up, in fact I'll link it, Easy Count thread, and because it's not thread, it is more a wire that you can use for stitching and for fabric. It just pulls all the way through. Even if you stitched over it, you've got cross stitch all the way over it. If you pull it, or maybe kind of pull it up and cut it halfway through kind of thing, it'll just pull straight out. And then, yeah, I don't think it will make that noise, but it will pull out. Parking. Parking is a method of doing large, the full coverage projects that I was on about before, really big, a BAP, big, massive project. And parking is a method of stitching where you read the chart and you stitch the colours in a certain area of the chart. Some people usually do a 10 by 10 square, and once you've done the colours in there, or once you've done one of the colours, you've stitched all of the stitches in one colour floss in that 10 by 10 square. You then look at the next time that that particular colour symbol appears in the square below, and you will put your needle, or put your thread into the position in the square below where you will next make the next stitch. Hopefully that makes sense. So if I'm reading a chart and I've completed this square here, and I know that the next time that this particular colour appears, maybe not even that block, maybe it's the block below, and it appears in that stitch right there, I will take it round the back, and then pull the needle and pull the thread up at the beginning of the stitch below, and then just let it dangle. And then you continue to complete all of the stitches in that particular 10 by 10 square, doing the same for the rest of them. So you complete the next colour, and then you move it to the position or the next time that it appears in the square or the square below, wherever you feel comfortable doing it. And then once you've done that for all of the colours in that particular 10 by 10 square, you think, yay, another 10 by 10 square, I'll go on to the next one. And then you go on to the next 10 by 10 square, and when you come to start a colour that's there, you're already in the right position. Yeah, so it's just a way of keep doing it, so it's easy to keep track, especially when a lot of the charts, particularly Hayes or a lot of full coverage pieces, they have lots of colours on, and if you didn't do it parking, then you might get lost. Another way that people like to do full coverage pieces is what's called cross-country. Cross-country is where you take, in a similar method to parking, you cover all the colours in, all the stitches in one colour in a particular area, but cross-country is usually over a greater area, so you wouldn't do the 10 by 10 square, you'd maybe do I don't know, 30 by 30 or 40 by 40, or some people do a page. And then once you've done all of the stitches in one particular colour on that page, you'll then tie your thread off completely and begin a new colour. And again, do all the colours, all the stitches of that particular colour or of that particular symbol on the page, tie it off, and then start again. That is cross-country. Extreme cross-country is where you essentially do the cross-country over several pages. Some people even do them for the whole entire project at once. I know there's a lady on Stitch Mania, the Facebook group Stitch Mania, and she posts up when she does colours. I think she's on to about the 26th colour now. She'll do the whole project. We're talking like 8 pages at a time. She'll basically see where a particular colour is and stitch the whole entire chart, whole 8 pages of this full coverage piece, and then once she's done that colour, that's that colour done. Start with another colour. Yeah, I think you have to have a lot of organisation for that, because I'm always missing stitches. But that is extreme cross-country, and cross-country and parking. Next page, sorry, I've got some full notes. Right, a hoop. This is what people use to put their fabric in. So you will have a bottom piece, and then you will get this bottom piece, lay the fabric on top of the bottom piece of the hoop, and then you'll take, let me just loosen this off. No, that's tightening it. No. It's hard to do one-handed. Then you take the top of the hoop and you'll place it over the bottom, like that, and then push it down. And essentially, you just kind of sandwiched that fabric between the hoops. So it's the top hoop, the bottom hoop, and you would adjust it here. This will be known as the front part. This is the back. I'll drop my fabric, never mind. Yeah, and it just adds tension. It kind of opens up, especially with even weaves and linens. It kind of makes it a lot clearer and a lot easier to see your fabric or your holes in the fabric. This is a spring-loaded one, similar to the other one. I find, coming from England, living in England, these are quite hard to find. You can find the wooden ones, but these are quite hard to find. I'm not used to using them, as you can probably tell, because I can't get it to really work. There we go. Yeah, there we go. That's worked the same way as the hoop one. One below, then your fabric, and then another one on top. Q-snap. This is a Q-snap. It's essentially a pipe, a bit of pipe, plastic piping. It can come in lots of different sizes. Now, when people say 9 by 9, they mean 9 inches across, 9 inches above there, or you can have 11 by 11. I'm not really too sure on the sizes. I think this is a 9 by 9. So what would happen is the base of the hoop goes there, of the Q-snap goes there. Your fabric would go over that, like that, and then you take these small ridged U-shaped ones, and they just slot on the top, and they kind of grip the fabric. Let me just do another one there, and you do that on all 4 sides of your Q-snap. Obviously you want to get it a lot neater than I am. I'm just kind of rushing just to kind of show you guys. So yeah, that would be, that is bad. That would be your Q-snap. That would be your front, that would be your back. And if you want to increase the tension, so this is feeling a bit loose, some people like it loose. To tighten it up, you just basically scroll these round a bit. Scroll these round a bit, like a snare drum. Yeah, so you've got some high tension on that, and it makes it easier to see the holes. There we go, that's a Q-snap. What else have we got? Grime guard. I don't actually have any grime guards. I'm learning how to make them. I'm doing a sewing course soon, so hopefully I can make some. These basically go round. It's a material, usually a pattern material with like some cotton fabric, really snazzy design, that kind of thing, on elastic, and it goes around the base here, or sorry, the base, all the sides of it, and you would get the excess fabric and kind of put it inside the grime guard like this. I'll show a picture so you'll know what I mean, and it keeps it safe and clean. And sometimes when we kind of hold the Q-snaps, or you can get them for hoops as well, yeah, you kind of get fingerprints. Even if you've got clean hands, they might have a bit of muck on, that kind of thing. So yeah, people like to use them. Some people do, some people don't. Personally, I don't. That's mainly because I haven't got one. I think they're quite handy, especially if not so much, well, yeah, for the keeping it clean, but especially if you're doing quite a large project and there's a lot of excess fabric, you kind of tuck that up without it kind of flopping around, or without it kind of wandering around the back and you stitching through it, and then you look 3 hours later and you've stitched half your back to your front, that kind of thing. Right, a haid. A haid refers, H-A-E-D even, haid refers to Heaven and Earth Designs. This is a company run by a lovely lady called Michelle, and they do full coverage pieces, BAPs, and they are beautiful. Some really beautiful designs, and we're talking pages. It's not something that little, these things take years and years to do. I have a few, mainly because I just like looking, thinking, oh, that's beautiful, I want to stitch that. Yes, I think I've got like 4, no, I've got like 6 now, and that would probably take me about 12 years to do if I did nothing but them.
But they're beautiful and they're fun, and there's some of the, you look at some pictures of people stitching that they've done on Hades and they're beautiful. They're usually like well, they range from like characters and scenes, and there's just so many, so I'll link. They are beautiful. Mirror is another one you might have heard of when people say my mirror. Mirabilia. There we go. This is an example of a Mirabilia by Nora Corbett. This is Bluebeard's Princess. This is one of the mermaid ranges. There's mermaids and fairies and fancy ladies, and they're known for being stitched on your linens. People usually like to do a lot of hand-dyed ones on there, and there's lots of beads and intricate detail, and they're beautiful. So that's, if people say my mirror, Mirabilia. Loop method is a method of starting your stitches. Sorry, small child wanted to get in. Loop method is a way of starting your stitches, and you will take the one thread, and you will put the ends together, and then with the loop there, you'll thread the needle on the loop, move it towards the end, so the loop's here, and then you will stitch up and then pull it through. So you'll be at the front, so then you'll stitch through to the back and then come round to the front again, and then you'll put the needle through the little loop that's just left dangling at the front, pull that through, give it a little tug, and then move it through to the back. That essentially starts your stitch with one thread. You're set up ready to go. Obviously you've got 2 parts to the thread already loaded on the needle, and it reduces the waste of when you're stitching at the front, so you're not having to like make knots or go loop it under threads that you've already done to kind of start off. It's just a nice and neat way of starting. If you want more details about how to do that, I kind of show that a bit better in my railroading video, and I'll put a link down below to that. A waist knot. A waist knot, I'll show you a picture of people using waist knots here. Bling. It's essentially where you make a knot at the front of the fabric, and then you go round to the back, and then you move along several stitches to whereabouts you want to start stitching, and then you'll stitch, and as you're stitching along a certain row, you incorporate the little tail of the knot, the little tail from the knot. You'll incorporate that into your stitches as you go along to secure it, and then when you're comfortable that it's been secured, people will either just snip the knot off and leave it there. So obviously snip the knot off the front, so the front is nice and smooth, and then the little knot tail is just already incorporated into the back. That's another way of starting it. Right, 2/2. 2/2 is my trusty needle and thread. It's where there are two individual strands. When you have typical, can't find my, here we go. When you have your skein and you have your floss, just tap that a little bit, you'll notice in a strand of floss there are 6 individual strands. So 6 individual thread strands in one skein of floss. And when you're stitching, typically you will stitch with 2 of them. So when you have 2 of them, obviously you separate them out. There we go, so you've got 2 just there. And 2/2 is essentially 2 small individual threads here over 2 of these threads here. So let me just show you an example. So in fact I'll do it on the hoop because that might be a bit easier. So we'll come up. There we go, we'll come up
and 1, 2. So if you can see when my needle goes in, it's not, can I get that for focus a bit? No. What I've done is I've gone over, in fact I've just gone up there, I've gone over 2 of these strands. If you remember when I said on even weave, it generally goes one, then another, then another, then another, rather than being blocks in Aida. So 2 over 2 is used on even weave and linens, where you take 2 individual strands of the floss and you will sew over 2 of those strands in the even weave or in the linen. So let me show you an example of a 2 over 2. So there we go. 1, 2. So that would be 1. So you can see that stitch. I've brought 2 strands and gone over 2 of the individual strands that are coming down. Okay, next we have 1 over 1, and this is similar to 2 over 2, except I use, or if you wanted to go 2 over 1, then you would use 2 of, undone my needle, then you would use 2 of the floss threads, and instead of going over 2 of the individual threads running down the even weave, you would just do 1. So that's 2 over 2. Let me do 2 over 1 to kind of show you. So 2 over 1 is obviously going to result in a smaller stitch because you're not going over 2. There. You can see the larger one is 2 over 2, and then the smaller one is 2 over 1. What you can also have is 1 over 2, which is 1 strand of floss over 2 strands of the wafted weaves going down that make up your even weave. See, 1 over 2 or 1 over 1. That's how you work that. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll do a video all about fabrics and a bit more in depth on fabrics in the future, and hopefully if you don't understand it now you will after watching that. Right, tent stitch, last one is a tent stitch. Tent stitch is a way of stitching on a full coverage piece where you essentially only stitch half a stitch, so you'll just stitch the top stitch, but it's not as if you kind of go up and then down and then up and then down. You need to stitch a specific way on the back as well, and this kind of adds a bit more body on the back to kind of back up the one on the front, if that makes sense, to kind of increase the colour that you get through. Obviously if you do tent stitch, the advantage is as you're stitching along you're only stitching half the stitches because you're not doing full crosses. Full crosses being the bottom and then the top. Tent stitch is just the top. But yeah, so it might just be the top on the front, but on the back you stitch in a certain way to kind of fluff up the colour, if you want, back up the colour at the back as well. The advantage being you only do half the stitches, so a project that might take you 2 months only takes you 6 weeks, a month. The disadvantage of that, the disadvantage being that the colouring, the coverage is not that good. It's not that good if you choose a count in a fabric that is quite low. So if you're doing your full coverage piece on a piece of even weave, which is 22 count even weave, so the holes are quite far apart, if you're doing a stitch across that, you're more likely to see the colour of the fabric, which is fine, except if you're stitching black on white, there'll be a lot of white coming through. The higher the fabric count, so if you have the same piece of even weave is a 28, then you'll have 28 stitches in 28 little holes in that inch. So when you do a stitch on that, the stitch will be smaller, closer together, and you'll be less likely to see all of the white of the fabric behind. Incidentally, I use something like this, which is my stitch gauge, which we can open my face and it should focus. I use something like this. So if I have a piece of fabric and I'm like, oh, I don't know what count it is, count being the number of holes per inch, or HPI, you can use something like this, a little calculator, well, not calculator, a little ruler, calculator, a little ruler, and you just put it against your fabric and you see where the holes line up with the indentations in the ruler, and it will tell you the count. So then you'll know whether it's 22 count, 32 count, that kind of thing. But as I said, if you can see on here, you can see, hopefully you can, that will focus. The higher the count, the smaller the distance between the holes. And generally, as you, if you're a beginner, I don't know whether you know this, but here you go, top tip, this is for you. If you're stitching on even weave or linens and you're thinking, I want to try, I don't know which one I want to get, kind of thing, if you're used to stitching on 14 count Aida, double it and stitch 2 over 1. So 14 count Aida then becomes 28 count even weave, but instead of stitching over one of the little Aida blocks, so instead of stitching over 1 for Aida, you'll stitch over 2. So you'll stitch over 2 of the little wafty weaves. So you'll go from here, miss 1, and then stitch, obviously up there. So miss 1 and then stitch. So the stitch length works out the same, the picture works out the same, because you're just missing that hole. So yeah, 14 count Aida works out as 28 count even weave. And yeah, I think I said, obviously the higher the stitch count, higher the count of fabric, the smaller the holes, the smaller the stitches. Yeah, so generally the count will determine how you stitch. So if you have something like 11 count Aida, you'll generally stitch with 3 of the little strands over 1. If you're stitching with 18 count Aida, it'll be 2 of the threads over 1 block of Aida. When you get up to like 40 count, it will generally be 1 strand over 1. And that is because tiny little stitches and that is because it reduces the bulk. If you have 40 count and you try and stitch with 2 of your strands, 2 of these individual little strands over 40 count, it's going to bulk. It's basically just going to end up with this thick wodge of just fabric and floss, and it'll be very hard to manage. So yeah, so you'll need to kind of adjust how many threads you use for how many holes depending on the fabric. I think that's about it. That's all of the things, all of the terminology and things that I have to share. It's quite a long video, sorry. If there's anything that I haven't covered, by all means ask in a comment and I'll answer if I can. And usually I end with a joke. I would tell you a joke about pizza, but it's a bit cheesy. Oh, I love my cheesy jokes. Love it. That's it. I hope you found this informative, and if you did, please like and subscribe. It's much appreciated, and I'll put down lots of links and things at the bottom, so check them out. As I said before, if you want to watch
something a bit more humorous than me just rattling on at you. You can watch this in a more humorous quiz version, and I'll leave a link to that. And lots of other people have done links of testing their husband with cross-stitch terminology as well. So as people put links in, I'll edit them in the description as well. So there's a bit of a reference there if you want to watch them. That's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. I can hear someone coming up the stairs. Hello? Yeah?
Hello? Excuse me. Do you want a bacon sandwich?
No, thank you.
Okay. See you later.
How come you want a bacon sandwich? Is that what you're making?
Yeah.
I thought you wanted Dirty Bird.
Is that right? I was making the dude a bacon sandwich.
Alright.
Okay.
I don't want one.
Have you done the dad jokes yet?
I've done one of them.
Okay. Cool. What's brown and sicky?
A stick.
What's green herring goes up and down?
Gooseberry and left.
Okay. See you later.
Yeah, it's not like I haven't heard them for 5 times this holiday. Mike! Did you want Dirty Bird?
How dirty is the Dirty Bird?
The Dirty Bird is very dirty.
Awesome, that sounds good.
Don't lean on my chair, I'll break it.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, see you later.
See you later, love.
Alright.
Oh, Mike, you're gonna have to cut that coffin. Oh. Okay. Oh, ooh, nearly broke my camera.